Hey guys, I'm Sean. I'm a second year at the university, and being a member of academia, being a student, one thing that I realized that a lot of my peers often bring up, a little bit too much, is existentialism. One of the most common questions if you pass by the library, you're going to hear people say, why am I doing this? Why did I take this class? Why am I this major? Why? Really the question we should be asking is, why are we going to school? And a lot of times we think that the answer is to get enlightenment, to become smarter, to gain more knowledge. But the answer really is this. Go to school, get a job. And I know this might seem crude, but let's admit, this is the reality. Only by pursuing an education can we really further our career. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with this, just to reiterate that. But there is a problem with this, and it's actually created the biggest rule in academia, the biggest rule in education, the biggest problem facing the future of education. And it's this. Failure is not an option, at least in academic terms. Our schools have taught us that perfection is a 4.0. That perfection isn't chasing classes outside of what you're comfortable with. Educational culture has forced us to think that the best thing that we can do is simply succeed, but not experience failure. What I do want to say, though, just carefully here, is that I'm not saying anything against success. I want to say that the problem that we have with our culture is that we're saying that we have to avoid failure. And this created something called checkbox culture. Basically, when we decided that perfection or the betterment of a student is determined by how little failures they have, how high their GPA is, we told them that they don't have to pursue other things as hardcore. They just have to check the boxes, do what's necessary, but most importantly, not mess up. Now, interestingly enough, this was a principle that I learned very early on, and it's something that I actually owe to my ethnicity. See, I'm Indian American, as in my parents came from India, and I was born in the US. Nebraska, actually. I'll let people know that, but the reason I mentioned the fact that I'm Indian, and the reason it has any context whatsoever with our discussion currently, is because Indians have a certain way of interpreting that big rule. Failure is not an option. Well, for a lot of Indians, and obviously other cultures as well, but from my experience, failure, defined by a lot of my Indian friends, was specific. Failure wasn't failure to get a job. Failure was the inability to get the job, or at least a select few jobs. These jobs are engineering, finance, and of course, medicine. Now, why medicine? What's so fascinating about medicine? Why do you see so many Indian biology majors? Well, it's because growing up, there was only one recognizable Indian face on television, and it's this guy. That's right, we grew up. I could only name one role model growing up, and that's this guy, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, the chief medical correspondent to CNN. Growing up, this was the guy who we were raised to be. We were programmed to chase after. We were told that if you wanted to make your family happy, if you want to make your community proud of you, you had to go and become a doctor. And how do you become a doctor? How do you beat education? By not messing up, by completely avoiding failure. So as a result, I realized that a lot of my friends were stifling themselves. I saw people who had creative ambitions, but instead were just focusing on doing the same inane school tasks. They were becoming assembly line people that I just called Indian pre-meds, because I knew so many. But for me, what I wanted was different. I wanted to be my own person. I wanted to seek an education outside of formal education. So one reason that I hated school was because it lied to me. And I think it lied to all of you guys too. Because education told us that you can have an impact. The stuff that you do is going to change the world. And that is that's a total lie, okay? That's a total lie, because you're not graded on how much of an impact you left. You're graded on the ability to memorize terms and then regurgitate that information in a quiz, and then regurgitate that information again in a month for an exam, and then every semester you regurgitate a whole bunch of information for a final exam, which by the way are in 4 days. So I hated school, and I wanted to learn things outside of it. So it's no surprise that I decided to pursue things outside of school, but still were still areas of knowledge. So in 8th grade, I learned to code. And I really liked programming because, in a weird way, it allowed me to manipulate machines and at the same time bring people together. I explored the fascinating possibilities of software, of hardware, and the weird thing is it took a lot of my time. It took most of my time that I probably should have been studying because in 8th grade, I got a D+ in history. And the sad thing is, that was my first D+, but it wasn't my last. I spent a lot of my time focusing on things outside of school, but I wasn't really afraid of that. Failure wasn't part of my blueprint. I didn't subscribe to that community in that sense. But moving on to high school, I decided I could pursue something beyond computer science. I looked and found entrepreneurship. See, maybe it was perfect for me that I became an entrepreneur in high school because high school education wasn't cutting it. I wanted to learn more, and I wanted to directly impact people through the businesses that I created. So specifically, I worked in social entrepreneurship, which is the idea of basically creating businesses that improve society. And I experienced a lot of success. I got to go to MIT for a month and create businesses through their infrastructure. I got to study with people that I never studied with, and I got to really create an impact on people. Does anybody know these two companies? Well, that's because they're mine. One thing about being an entrepreneur is that it really exposes you to failure. This is a real statistic. About 90% of companies fail within their first year. And that's powerful because I was not in that elite 10%. I had gotten grants, I'd gotten money, but my vision, my execution, whatever it wasn't clear enough. So the impact that I wanted to leave upon people through entrepreneurship wasn't there. So I felt pretty lost. And this is also the same time that we're going to be going into senior year of high school. So all of my pre-med friends who are out there killing it, right? They're about to become doctors. All of my pre-engineering friends are about to become engineers. What was I? I was pre-nothing. I'm pre-nada. I was absolutely lost. And luckily, though, even though I wasn't a great entrepreneur, I at least maintained some of the main principles. And the biggest principle that I learned is that the best time to find solutions, the best time to explore, is when you're lost. Because there's no landmarks, there's no benchmarks. You're free to create, you're free to think. So I explored. I explored a bunch of different options. I explored tutoring. I worked as a tutor. I explored computer science further. I worked in IT. I worked as a lifeguard because it was fun. And interestingly enough, the weirdest thing that I did was I actually became a volunteer at a hospital. Not because I wanted to become a doctor, but because it was community service and I lived 5 minutes from a hospital. And interestingly enough, you don't know who you fall in love with. You don't know what you fall in love with doing, and that's kind of what being in a hospital did for me. I realized through my interactions, and it wasn't a single moment, it was the process of starting as a volunteer, talking to patients families, talking to doctors, having staff encourage me, having staff teach me about what they do, learning about the impact, seeing the impact. I didn't fall in love immediately, but by the time I was done with senior year, by the time I was prepared to graduate, I decided, you know what, I think this is what I want to do. I had become just another Indian pre-med. Basically, the bane of my 18 years, I had ended up becoming. So then and this wasn't a self-evident thing. I really abstained from going into medicine because I was afraid of being viewed like this. But let's move on. Let's think about what I had to do, what I had to overcome. See, because the other Indian pre-meds had done something that I hadn't. They followed this rule. They had good GPAs. They took AP Sciences. They did HOSA. They volunteered. They shadowed. They'd been doing this years before I even volunteered my first time. Me, my resume, my track record was littered with failures. So how could I have ever made it? Because after all, we know that the key to being successful is to not fail. So I had to push myself. I had to examine the way that I experienced failure, and I had to look at what was I doing wrong. See, one of the big things that I did was I compared myself to people just because they were the same color as me, or because they had the same interests as me. And this created a lot of problems for me going forward. I had a fixed mindset. See, let's say me and my friend were both studying for the same test, and he studies 1 hour and I study 1 hour. Every single time my friend would know twice as much as me. And I thought, well, he's just twice as smart. And you know what? Most of my friends are smarter than me. I'm not that, But what is important to realize is that I could still beat them. I could still get my grades up. It just required me working triple the amount. So I experienced unpredicted success. And I say unpredicted because going into college saying, hey guys, I want to become a doctor, I was literally laughed at. Like literally I told my friends and they were like, sure. It was a startling experience. It kind of hurt me. And my advisor said the same thing. They said, Sean, a student with your GPA doesn't turn overnight. And it wasn't overnight. I started in the summer. I had to reevaluate what I was doing wrong. I pushed myself not just to study more, but study more efficiently. And my success was that people expected me to fail. People expected me to drop out, and I didn't drop out. I got a 4.0 my first semester. It was the complete opposite. And so I realized going into college, and now even where I stand right now, that success is just less than half the picture. In fact, if you really want to understand a little bit more about me, you should find out about what I did to kind of not only humble myself, but to teach myself. And that's about the creation of my resume. So I'm familiar you guys all know or probably have a resume, right? What is it? It's a collection of your achievements, your accolades, your education. Well, my resume is the opposite. It's a collection of my screw-ups. It's a collection of the things that I didn't get, the things that I lost. In my resume, I mentioned how I won a pitch competition internationally and created Virtual Lab. In my resume, I talk about how I lost that money in about 3 months. The point is that I have learned to not only embrace failure, but I've also begun to accept that it's not just part of my past, it's a permanent part of my future. And in doing so, I realized that I'm not just another Indian pre-med, because I have a unique set of experiences. I have a unique set of ideals that I'd like to translate to the world. So who am I to say that, or who is anybody to say that I was programmed into this profession? Believe me, I tried 20 different careers, and I only ended up at this one because I can't think of anything else to do. Going forward, though, I do want to say this. I'm not a doctor, and I haven't still even gotten into med school. I haven't taken my MCAT yet. I haven't graduated, and there are a lot of things in between that I have yet to finish, yet to complete. Success is no means guaranteed, and that's not the way that I'm looking at it. 10 years from now, I might not be seeing patients. The one thing that is certain is failure, and this isn't meant to demotivate me or demotivate you. The idea behind this is the fact that you have to know that you're going to stumble. You have to acknowledge the fact that you're not going to get 100 on every exam. And you have to be able to say, okay, I'm not flawed, I'm just capable of improvement. I wasn't a bad student, I just had to become a better one. So let's evaluate this rule. Failure is not an option. I disagree. Failure is absolutely an option. And the reason I say this is because failure is equivalent to exploration. And exploration cannot occur without failure. So the fact that I was given the opportunity to fail, the fact that I wasn't given a blueprint, the fact that my interests in classes weren't manufactured to go into a career, only then was I able to find a career that I wanted to do. But as I said, I'm not just an Indian doctor, I'm just not an Indian pre-med. This is a universal problem. As I said, this is the biggest problem in academics, not just in the Indian community. A lot of communities do this, especially immigrant communities. So we have to go in and say that, listen, creating these monoliths by which we raise our children is not setting them up for success. We're setting them up for a life of insecurity, an inability to see themselves as growing individuals. We're putting our kids at risk by taking them from it. So to conclude, I'm Indian, yes. I'm Hindu, I speak Hindi, and my mom cooks a mean butter chicken. There isn't anything that I would trade for being Indian. And yeah, I'm also pre-med. In the same way that I wouldn't trade being Indian for anything, I don't think I wanted to spend my life doing anything else. And I'll do whatever it takes to pursue that passion. But I want you guys to understand that this guy is not the reason why. Sanjay Gupta is a great guy. He's smart, he's intelligent, and in fact, I met him this summer. And I told him, you know what, dude, I want to become a doctor. And he kind of looked at me like, of course. And I know this is too late to say to him now, but I want to say it's not because of you, man. And that's nothing against you, but it's not because of who you were or what you represented to my community or to my group of people. It's because I was given the option to fail. I was given the option to pursue 20 different careers, and in doing so, I was preparing myself for the one that I think I was made for. And this is something I want you guys to all understand as well. Right now, you guys are all holding yourselves back. You guys are all focusing too much on just getting into the career. You guys are not focusing on experiencing the wide spectrum of growth that you can have. So I encourage you to go outside your comfort zone. A 3.7, a 3.3 will not kill you. It might kill your chance of getting into med school, but that's okay. Because you don't want to just get into med school. You want to become the best person you can be. Thank you.